Thank you so much, guys, for joining. So starting today, for the next couple of classes, we are going to see designing, developing, and deploying. We will start with simple projects, and we will gradually get to more complex and real-world projects. So first, today we are starting with a very simple one. So we use Design Center for designing our API, and for building it or developing it, we use Anypoint Studio, and we push it or we deploy it to Anypoint platform. So to use for designing and also to deploy your API, you need to have an account, Anypoint platform account. I guess some of you have created before. It expires every month. So you can be creative in the way you create your account, and every month, like in my case, for example, I just use FishNov. Now I have an account called FishNov 2022. Then I will have Fish Deck 2022, then Fish Jam 2023, and so on. You use the same email. You can use the same email, the same name, and the only thing you change is the username. And the other thing that you have to be cautious of also is your projects. When your account expires, they get lost. But there is a workaround. You can just download them, and when you create an account next month, you upload it. So I have shared this Google slides that we are going to see today in the chat and also in the Telegram group. I have questions also there, so you can open it from there. So let me show you my Anypoint platform exit. So mine, I have here, I have logged into Anypoint platform. As you can see, there are different services. Today we are going to see Design Center for designing our API. How do we design an API? Then how do we take it to Anypoint Studio? Then how do we push it to Anypoint platform? And what are the steps in each one of them is what we are looking at. So we will do this using walkthroughs, as I said, simple examples, and gradually develop more real-world cases. So today, the steps for today are outlined on this slide. We will have API specification using Design Center. We will test it there after we design it. Then we will bring it to Anypoint Studio. We will generate flows using API Kit Router. API Kit Router generates flow for us from RAML, from just the text. It creates the minimal code. Based on that, you can read about API Kit from the link. Also, we will see while testing, API Kit is also used for validating incoming requests. We will see all of this. Then once we bring it to Anypoint Studio, we are going to enhance it. So the design is like proof of concept. Like, for example, if you are an architect and if you are to design, let's say, a skyscraper, first you will have just an idea of it and just have rough drawings about it on piece of papers and discuss with people who can give you feedback. And then once you have a solid understanding, you go to the actual building or to the actual design. We spend all our time on a building. Mainly that is what takes more time. But in real world, what comes first is designing it, getting feedback from stakeholders or from people, from other developers, improving it. And then once you have the RAML code, you take it to Anypoint Studio. So once we take it to Anypoint Studio, then you enhance it, you make it, then the API will be the usable API. You add connections. It could be connections to databases, to different data sources, different data manipulations, and so on. So we will take it to Anypoint Studio, and we will enhance it, and then we will test it. We will see how it behaves, what the different error codes are, and why it does like that. Last but not least, we are going to push it to Cloud Hub. Pushing here means just deploying. And once we deploy it, rather than using localhost, now we will use the URL that we get from Cloud Hub to test it. So having said that, Okay, it opens the API kit link. So we have a requirement. This is a requirement, a simple example. The requirement is create an application that returns the requested W3 schools data. So we have been working with W3 schools data sets, and the data sets are customers, orders, products, suppliers, shippers, order, details, employees, and categories that are outlined there. And the other requirement is the data set name should be passed as a query parameter. And that query parameter, let's call it data. And the other requirement at the bottom of this page is the data should be returned as JSON, not XML or CSV. These are the requirements. So based on these simple requirements, we will see how we can design it in Design Center using RAML and bring it to Anypoint Studio, then add our actual data to the project, then push it to Anypoint platform. Okay, so now once you log into Anypoint platform, you see the different services they have. Let me see, yeah. You see the different services they have. Today we are looking at Design Center. So you start the Design Center, just click Start Design Center. Now I have this sample project that I was practicing with to create a new API. You click Create New here. So under Create New, there are different options. We will see these options one by one. Today we will start with the first one, New API specification. Define how the API will behave and how it communicates with other systems and APIs. And we give it a name. So let's call it W3 Schools API. And after that, how do you want to draft the API specification? We'll just accept the default. There is kind of drag and drop here. The second one, guide me through it. We will see that another time. You can also integrate it with GitHub, synchronize it with your GitHub account by providing tokens so that you can push it to GitHub and get code from GitHub and so on. That one also we'll see it another time. Today, we will see with the first one. I'm comfortable designing it on my own. So under specification language, there are, how many languages do we see here? We have a couple of them, RAML, and we have this one, JSON-based, YAML-based. The common one is this RAML. That is what we are looking at, what we are going to be working with in this course. So RAML stands for RESTful API Modeling Language. So M stands modeling, L language, A API, R RESTful. So that is what we are using. It is human readable and also computers understand it. Like we have used a similar one before when we set up the configuration properties. It is based on YAML. So we will see how it behaves. Okay. So next we click Create API. Now it creates this one that is C. In here, we have different panels, as you can see. On the left, it is called File Explorer. So this part on the left, it is called File Explorer. We create folders and files and different dependencies here. We will see that. And our code, we put it in the middle part, in the middle, this one. It is called Editor. And at the bottom part is called Shelf. It gives us different hints, help based, it is context based on where we are in our design, what we have written before. It gives us suggestions of what we can enter next. And the part on the right is the API console. We'll see, we test our APIs here, and it shows us the endpoints and so on. So in this slide, I have an example here. You see File Explorer on the left, Editor on the top right, top center, and the shelf is on the bottom, the middle, and on the right, we have API console. So we have API, the API console is for testing, it shows the endpoints. We can have API consoles here in Design Center. And also when we take this around to Anypoint Studio also, it will create another kind of API console. I want you to pay attention. We have also API console in Exchange. So 3 API consoles for testing, we will see. So now let's just, based on this requirement, let's see how we do our design. Where is it? The requirement is here. So we will call it, so the first thing, there are different things we can put here. If I just click enter, it gives me suggestions here. You see in the shelf. Let me move this down. Okay. So in the shelf, you see on the bottom, I can add, for example, here, documentation, description, documentation, media, default media type, and so on. We'll see these ones one by one. Let's do a simple one first today. So if you remember in Anypoint Studio, I think it was in class 9, we created a project that returns the requested data from W3 schools based on a query parameter. Let me open it. And we specified path. The path there, we call it resource in RAML. So I will show you how we put the resource and what really it is. So it was this one, I guess. Okay, something is corrupt, I guess it seems. So we have this one from our previous class. Let me restart it. It was working before. Now it says it's corrupt. So the first thing, like the paths, we specify paths, right? We have paths and optional base paths in Anypoint Studio. So the paths, we put it as, it is called as a resource. And the resources are simply objects identified by the web service URL that we want to act upon using HTTP method for sending requests. So we will see let's create our resource as W3 schools, like the path or the resource. And we specify our resource using /. So we start with /. Let me start a couple of lines down here. So our resource, let's call it W3 schools. Now, after our resources, our methods, and everything, we put colon. So I put colon. Now, if I click enter, because it understands it, the next line, it will be indented. Indentation is very important. That is how RAML understands what we are doing. If our indentation is incorrect, then it will give us an error. So when we get an error, one thing that we have to check is if there is error with indentation. So if I click enter, you see it is indented. Now, when I do like that, you see in the shelf, the suggestions change. There is you see messages, delete, get, post, put, and so on. The documentation also, the types and the traits, security, parameters, all of these things we are going to see. So according in our requirements, what we said is we are going to pass the query parameter, the dataset name. We are going to pass it as a query parameter called data. So let's add that here. As you see now, okay. Before we do that, actually, we need the method. So it is for getting the data. For getting data, we use get method. For sending data, we use post method. So we are starting with get first. So the query parameter should come after get. So get, as you see, when I click get, after that, it is indented again. It is a nested structure. And now I can add query parameter. Under parameters here in the served on the shelf, you see headers in query parameters. I need query parameters. I just click query parameters. Now this one is also indented, the right indentation, it takes care for me. And on the right, also pay attention on the right, under API endpointers, you see the resource, W3 schools, and the message that we have put already so far. So we say the query parameter, we are going to call it data. So I put data. For this one, since it doesn't know it, what query parameter I would use, it didn't give me any suggestion. Now, when I click enter, there are different things that it gives me suggestion that are relevant to query parameters. One of them is it required or not? By default, query parameters, if we put them here, they are required, but we can make them optional by adding required false. If I do like this, now it will be false. But if I exclude this, by default, it will be required. And since in our case, we are our requirement is to return specific data set, then query parameter is required. So I can either put it or not. Just for to remind us, let's put it. So when I say required, this is options here. I have true. And after that, also, you see, can specify the maximum lengths, minimum lengths, the characters of the query parameter. We'll see the rest another time. For today, let's just use this one. Enumeration. Enumeration means just listing the possible values of the query parameters. So if I click this one, now it starts with a dash. As you can see so far, all of them, it has been putting colon after at the end. Now, but for enumeration, after you put enum colon, below that you put dash. So the options, the possible options. And if you pass something outside of these options, it would be an error. And we can copy paste them from here. These are the possible options we have, and I can actually bring it and paste it here. So if I do this, now these are the possible options. And when we test it here also, it is going to show us these possible options. After that, so this is for getting data. To get data, we don't send data, we just send some additional, we may send query parameters or headers. In this case, we just want to send the query parameter in the request. And then we have to specify what the response should look like. What data type do you want it to be, what error, the error codes, and so on. So for that, we put it under responses. So get is for getting. So the responses, we put it at the level of get. So we come here, we put it here. So if I go here, let's not under get. So the response is for get, not directly straight under the level of get, but rather under query parameter. So we have this get, everything here. So get acts on this resource, on the W3 schools resource, and all this rest also describe how this get should behave, what its inputs are, and what the expected output should be. So we go here, we put it here under query parameters. I have responses. But if I out indent it, you will see responses is not there. So you can see what error message, what error you made also from what shows in the shelf, from the suggestions. What you are looking for, if it is not shown in the shelf, then that means your indentation or something is wrong. So we indent it at this level, we have responses. Perfect. Now, the different responses, we have the standard HTTP codes. So under 200, when it works fine, when I click 200, it adds colon and there is indentation. Now, the data that comes back as a response is in the body. So I click body. I can click description and stuff, what it is doing. But here I need the body to describe what the body should look like. After I do that, you see in the shelf, I get different things. In this case, what I need for now is what the data type should be. And I want it to return as JSON. So I put application JSON. So I'm saying for this resource, W3 schools resource. It is get method. I can add post also, or all the different methods under this resource. It is possible, but now today we will see just only one method. So the input is, we describe them here, what they should look like. The response is what we are describing now. We said it should be of type JSON. So if you get a question, something like this, and then the question is, which one is the correct response, and it gives you different data types, you can know, you can see which one is the correct answer. I have one question here in the slides that you can look. It is this one. So see this Ramble example, it says refer to the exhibit, what data is expected by the post/accounts endpoint. So we have only one resource, accounts. It has get and post methods. So just focus on the post method now, which is at the bottom of the page here. And we have description, responses, 200, body, application JSON. And under application JSON, we put an example. Let's put an example first before we come actually to this question. So here, after we put the data type here for testing, so that other people can have a mocking test, see how it behaves, and give us feedback. We can provide example data. So let's provide example data. So here, after I click enter, there are these suggestions here, and I click example. I just want to give one example. Then under one example, it is from the W3 schools data. So I just want to give one data example here. I'm choosing from categories and just running this to get one row. So I have the data in Workbench. I hope you guys also have it from our previous work. So let me save this as JSON, because we said the data, the response should be as JSON. So we call this, temp is fine. And here I will change this to JSON. The data type should be JSON. We should save it as JSON data type. So I come here, then, click it. See, so this is the data, example data. Okay. Yeah, okay, sure, I will explain it. And plus, when we test it, you will understand it. That's a good question. What is Enum? Is what they are saying. Okay, let's copy this example. Hope you are able to see it. I will explain what this one is. When we test, you will see it. It is like a drop-down option, drop-down options. So example, indent it, and I give it this data. Usually, when we have example data, we don't put it in place. Rather, we say we add it as a file here on the left under the file explorer and refer it to that. But for this simple example, since it's a short example, let's just put it here. So we have this one. This is my example data. I just added from the, customers, categories. So we have category ID, category name, description. So this is dummy data for testing. And when we test it here, it is going to just return this data every time we send a request for all these categories. Now, once we make sure this is working, we pay attention to the right part. So we have here, you can click, you have summary, endpoints, and an endpoint is simply a resource and the resource with that method. We have just one method, W3 schools and get method. Click here. You can see here, one thing, it has created a URL for us to test it. And you see the query parameter, it says under query parameters, you see it is a string, and its name is data, it is a string, and it is required. The possible values are this one. So in num means you are specifying the possible values of the query parameters. Now, if I make this to false, query parameter will not be required. Now it is optional. Also, whereas if I remove this required part as a whole, by default, it is required. So it will be required, you will see here. Now it added required. So remember, if query parameter is here, even if it didn't explicitly say required true or false, it is always true. Now we can test this. You see there is try here, you can try it. You can try it here in the console. Also, you can make it public so that others can try it. Also, you can push it to Exchange for others in the company or other people also to test it. For today, we are just going to see here. We will not see Exchange. So click try it. Now see here. Our query parameter, under query parameters, you see query parameter data. It has asterisk. Asterisk means required field. This is what enum does. The possible values, I cannot pass something else in here, in this API console. You see, these are the possible values. So let's select customers, and I will click send. So when I click send now, it is not getting the actual W3 schools data. It is rather going to return this sample data. Every time I change, you see, we have this sample data, category ID1, beverages, soft drink, coffee, teas, and so on. What we just put here. This is just for testing purpose. And if I change also even to orders still, since I have that example, that is what it is going to return, as you can see here. And you may say, what's the point? What are we doing here? What kind of feedback do people give us here? The feedback is like based on the requirement is the data type, how should the data look like, what are the possible query parameters, what should be the resource, and so on. So also this one, you can make it public, as I said, for other people to try it, and you can specify due date to it. So you go here, we have mocking service configuration. Mocking is just like for testing it, and you can enable it to be public. You click mocking service here, and here there is make public. So if I just uncheck it, now it is public. This one, I can copy it, take it to either the web or Anypoint Studio, and it should give me the sample dummy data that I put. But here I have to add the resource, because I can have different resources under that API, and one resource can have multiple methods. So let's specify. We know the web, the browser supports get method. So when I send a request here, it means get. So W3 schools, and I have to pass my query parameter. Query parameter is also required. So I put data products. Here, this one I have to make it HTTP. Now, if I send this request, it is just going to return this one. So we have made it public by going to the mocking service and enabling public, and also we can set expiration date here. For example, if I just want you to test it today and tomorrow, after that, I don't want it to be public anymore, I can click here and set the expiration date, let's say to here, to 20. So now if I send my request, you will see it will give me that dummy data. You see here is the dummy data. We put category ID1, category name, and so on. We can also test it in Postman. Can bring it in Postman, specify the method, it is get, and the resource is W3 schools data. And let's put now orders, because it supports orders also, I guess. Let's see. Here are, yes, orders. Now I can send that request. Send. So it gives me that same data, same dummy data. It is not real data. This is just for testing purpose. Now let me disable public. So this is, now we have designed a very simple starting a Hello World API using GrammL. Now let's see how, once we design it, share it with people, they give us feedback, we simulate it, we make necessary changes. Now for building, how do we bring it to Anypoint Studio? This one, after I started it, it worked. That's good. So last week in our class 9, I think before 2 weeks, we built this one. What it does is we pass a query parameter, And based on the query parameter, it reads the appropriate data from the project, and using read URL function, then it returns it. See, we have attributes.queryparameters.data is a requested file. And here we were concatenating this part with query parameter with .csv to create the file name, the file path. And here we are reading it. And under that class, if I take you to that class, class 9, we have all the data in the project. The W3 schools data is here, and all of them are CSV. So in no minutes, just listing down these values. So this one now, rather than starting from building, now we started from designing and making sure we understood the requirements. Now, okay, we designed here. How do you bring it to Anypoint Studio? Before that, let's answer a couple of questions related to this one. So, which ones are related to this one? I'll show you. Let's start with this one. Slide 6. Refer to the exhibit. There is an error in the flight_ID resource get method. What needs to be done to fix the problem? So remember indentation here. There is flight resource indented followed by get method. Then we will see this one. We have not seen specifically like this, but you can see from the curly braces, it is a query parameter. A URI parameter. So flight_ID is URI parameter, and under it, there is a get method. So you can see from this, which one, let me number them so that you can share in the chat a number for the answer. If I put like this, number 1, remove blank line on row 9. Number 2, indent the get method under the flight ID resource. Number 3, remove the curly braces around flight_ID. Number 4, outdent the flight_ID query parameter or resource. Yep, perfect. Yep, we have to indent this. So it follows just this structure. At the top level, we have flight is indented under it. We have get, and the flight ID is from the flighters to return a specific flight with a provided ID. Then the last get, which is the second get, acts on the flight ID resource. If it acts on in that resource, it has to be under it and indented. We have another question here. What valid RAML retrieves details on a specific order by its order ID as a URI parameter? So just consider, you can put the colors if you want, but let's pay attention here. What do we have? We have orders resource. It doesn't have any method. This one, that means it returns only for a specific ID. It doesn't return the whole orders. And there is order ID as a URI parameter. It supports get method, and there is description there. Retrieves a specific order ID. So in the response, we have body 200 application. The data should be JSON, and we have an example. So, what is the question saying? What valid RAML retrieves details on a specific order by its order ID as a specific URI parameter? So for a specific URI parameter, how should we do it? Actually, the answer is there. Okay. Red, 1, blue. Okay. So let's see one by one why the wrong ones are wrong. See this one, for example. This method, it means get all the orders. And we don't have that here. It is to return for a specific order ID, right? Specific order ID. So this get method acts on this resource. Plus, if we have a URI parameter, it should be within curly braces. So this one cannot be an answer. This one, what makes it wrong is like this one, the URI parameter is put correctly, however, This one, it doesn't return a specific URI parameter. And last but not least, this one, yes, the get is good here, but this one is not the way we put a URI parameter. We put it inside curly braces. So the blue is correct. That's fine. Well, when you practice it, you will remember it. Probably it could be too much information in a single day. And we have this one. This one refers to the exhibit. What data is expected by post accounts endpoint? So we just started this before. We have accounts, resource, it supports two methods, get and post. Let's focus on post. It creates an account, is a description. And under body, you see the data type is JSON, good enough. Under example, you see the supported fields, name, address, customer, sinus, balance, and bank agent ID are the fields. So what you have to see from the options on the right is, one, it should be JSON. It cannot be XML. You see the first one in the options is XML. Second thing, you see from the two JSON objectives, you see the last one, it has ID column and ID field. And ID is not one of the included fields in the example. So the answer is C. Yep, the second one for that reason. And this one, we'll see it later. Let's see this one. This one, an easy one. Refer to the exhibit. What should be changed to fix the 415 error? It says unsupported. See in the error. First, let's start with the RAML on the left. There is accounts resource with post method, and the data type, it says it should be application JSON. The middle one, it is, we are sending a request to it. We are sending, we are sending data to it. And in the header name, you see content type, header value, text/value. So it's a text plain. We are sending it as text. However, in our RAML specification, it says the data type should be JSON. And that is why in the error, in the middle, under the 415 unsupported media type error, you see message unsupported media type. So from the options from 1 to 4, which one should be correct? Set the response content type header to text plain, which is actually already text plain. Set it to application JSON. Number 2, set the response content header to application JSON. And 4, set the request content type to header text plain. So this is the difference between request and response. So the input is in the request part in this case, and the response is what comes back. What comes back. And we don't have this RAML. It is not specifying a response. It is for the input, for the request, what we sent in the request. And in here also, in what we are building, in here, what we are designing, you can see under this get method, we have this input and we have this output of the response. So this question, it is related to the request, not to the response. So the answer should be yes. Yeah. It should be JSON number 1. Then is this the response or the request is the other thing we have to pay attention. Let's see what question we have. This one is very important. I said it a couple of times. Let me see if you paid attention. So refer to the exhibit. What is the correct URL to submit a GET request to the patient's resource? We just have one resource, patient's, GET is a method, query parameter is specified there. It is here of data type integer, and the example we have been given to 2017. So is it A, is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, so you see number 2 and number 4, they don't have query parameters. Number 1 and number 3, you see number 1. Oh, by the way, another thing, let me explain this. We have not seen it before yet. See the base URL in line number 3. So the base URL is what we use. After the base URL, we add the resource. The resource comes after the base URL, like what we were putting, like localhost.8081. We have base URL there. So based on that, do you put number 1 or number 4? The difference between number 1 and number 4 is number 1 has a query parameter, or do you put number 2 and number 3? Number 2 and number 3, they don't have the word API, whereas number 1 and number 4 they have the word API, one with query parameter, one without query parameter. So if query parameter is included like this, is it optional? Can I send without the query parameter, or it is mandatory and they have to include something? Let me see. Yes. Yeah, so the answer is, the correct answer is still it will be empty. I mean, it depends on what we have in the data, but in the request format, the main intention of this question is you have the base URI, then you add the resource, then you cannot sell without query parameter. In short, that is what the answer for this one is, because you have put query parameters and you didn't explicitly made it false, so it is required, so you have to include it. So the answer will be, this part is simply the base URI, patient is a resource, query parameter when we say include, it starts with question mark, then year, some year. Is there data that corresponds to that? If there is, it will say return data, otherwise it will be empty. So the answer for this one is that one. Yep, we covered many questions. Now, yes, it is required by default. That's what I wanted you to remember. Now, let's import our, let's go to the building phase. So far, we have been talking about the designing phase. So you can come to Anypoint Studio, and rather than creating flows by drag and drop, now you can import the RAML. The RAML code we wrote. Based on that, the API kit is going to generate flows for us, minimal flows based on that. So I click file, new, Mule project, like what we were doing before. The difference though now is, rather than simply clicking finish at the bottom, rather than doing that, we'll move this up. Okay, first let's give it project name. So design, develop, and deploy one. We'll have different sessions. That's why I'm calling it one. Let me see if I can minimize this. Now, this here. See now, if we just click finish, it will be empty, and we have to drag and drop different connectors and triggers and so on. But now we can also add the RAML code. If it is in our computer, if it is already downloaded, or we got it from GitHub and download it to our computer, simply click import RAML from local file. If it is from Design Center, we click this one. And in my case, it is in Design Center. You have to make sure you have Anypoint platform account, and your design is there in Design Center. And you have to also connect it with Anypoint Studio. If it is not, when you click this one, it will ask you to log in. So these 3 pointers, when I click 3 pointers, now it is going to go to Anypoint platform and the Design Center. It will show me what RAML specifications I have. So I just click on it. It is going to bring them here. My username is Fishnov 2022. It is from my username. And the API, the specification, we called it W3 Schools API. So I can click this one. Click it. Now it is going to generate flows for me. Not only that, there are a couple of new things here that you didn't see before, including a nice way of handling the errors. It is going to generate the API kit. It is going to generate different error messages for different status codes. and it also adds API console for testing it in the console locally. And the API console also, it routes the requests to the appropriate flow. And API console, the API router, it generates one flow per message. We are going to see that. In our case, we just have one resource and one message. But when we have multiple messages like post, get, put, and so on, it generates per endpoint. So click finish. Now, when we bring it here, we will enhance it, we'll finalize it, test it locally, and then push it. So you see it is now we have done all, we will do all 3 steps. You can see like what a real, the usual day of a developer may look like. See now, so we have API key router here. Let me collapse this first. Basically, we have 3 flows right now. You can just right click here and collapse all. So we have just 3 flows. The first one is the API router or the API key router. Second one is console. The flow we designed is the third one. You see it says get w3 schools and its configuration. So that is the flow that we are going to, that's the real flow. So let me expand this and show you. So this API key router, it generates the flows based on the RAM specification, and also it is going to validate requests. If there is any error with the requests, then it will give us the appropriate error message. And another new thing to pay attention to here is, so the API key router, this listener is now an entry point, and it has in the path, if you see here, there is /API asterisk. This asterisk is because after that we put the specific resource we have, the resource and any query parameters or ARI parameters if there are. In our case, we just have only this one. So when we send a request, rather than simply localhost w3 schools, it will be localhost API w3 schools with get method. So it has generated all of this for us. In here, in the transform message, you see this is the dummy data, the example we gave it. So this is just dummy, we can replace. We have to replace this part. So let's copy paste the data from class 9, the W schools data. I will bring it to this project. Class 9 is here. Just right click here. When we deploy it, all this data is going to data folder is also going to be deployed. So bring it under source main resources, paste it here. Now I have it here. And we have the code here also. I don't need to spend time writing it. From class 9, I'm bringing this from previous class. Why? I want to replace, to overwrite this. This dummy data we put was for testing. Now we want to put actual data. And the data here is a query parameter. We put it as a requirement, and we also included in the design the possible values. If I put an incorrect query parameter, a data set name that doesn't exist, the API key router will invalidate it, and it will give me an error message. And the other thing is, under this API kit router here, there are different, the error is handled very well. It generates all of these flows as well. So you see, if it is bad request under transform message, it says message, it will return this one. If it is not found, it is going to return this one. And if it is, the method is not allowed, in our case, the method is get, but if you pass put, for example, it is going to return this one. We'll see this by running it in deploy mode. The media type we specified is as JSON. Now, if we, in our request, if we expected XML, if we pass as XML, it is going to say as supported media type. So this is very, very nice thing. So now we just have only a couple of minutes. I have a hard stop at 9. So we are going to continue the rest part now next class. So now, yeah, the only thing we have done so far is we include this core table. Imagine if it is getting data from a database, then you extend this flow. You add connections to databases. It could be different databases. It could be choice router, scatter gather, and everything. We extend this flow. That is our actual real flow. Now let's quickly test it. So let me run it. I think first let me even show you under debug mode. Debug. I will add breakpoints so that you can see how the API kit router is routing it and how it invalidates requests when they are errors, when there are invalid incoming requests, not the responses, but the requests. Added this, saving it. So to come back to the slides again, you see we did this one already. API specification using Design Center. We also tested it there in the API console inside Design Center. Also using, we created a project in Anypoint Studio, and the API kit created minimal flows based on the specification for us. Then we enhanced it by including code that reads in the actual data and returns the data based on the query parameter. Now we are testing it. We'll generate various errors and understand the corresponding error codes. So this test is in Design Center. This test is in Anypoint Studio, whereas this test is once we deploy it. So you can see the data in this case is dummy data, whereas the data that will be returned in these two cases will be real data. Okay. Is this deployed? Yes. Now let's send a request. So as I said, pay attention to the path here. I have a code questions as well. We'll do them next time. We are running out of time. But remember, when we have API kit, here we have API kit router. Here we have API underscore this asterisk rather than a specific path. So we will include this in the request path. So let me open Postman and come to localhost. Do I have one localhost? No. Okay. We'll add one. So localhost. See, let me start from here. So when we do like this, when we have to understand to get to that resource first in here. First, it comes to the API kit router, and the path here, it has API. So we put, that's why we have API here, API. Then next, we put the specific resource we have. What resource do we have? The resource we have is one, it is Dowlis schools. So first it will come to this one. This is just error handling, I can collapse it. First it will come to here, to the kit, API kit. Then API kit will forward it to here and get the response and return the response. So that's why I added API. Before we were just putting the path, if the path was Dowlis schools, for example. And query parameter is must. For query parameter, we add question mark data equals to products. So if I send request now, and if I come here, and you see the request, it came to the API kit router. Now let's see where API kit router sends this one. I will move this, and I will click next processor. See, it came to this one. transform message. And in this flow, the data will be read based on the query parameter, and that data gets returned to Postman because I put products. That's why it returned products. Now let's see when it is error what it does. If I make this product, we don't have product is not a legit query parameter. Let's see where it sends it, where the API kit sends it. Send comes here again. When I click next, it will invalidate it. Now it is validation phase. It invalidated it. So what is the error now? If I click next, it is going to tell me the error and send it to the appropriate flow that returns, that handles that error. So when I click next, see, it came bad request. Bad request. And the error code for bad request is 400. So it returns whatever message is there. If I click this transform message, you see bad request. So if I click next, if I come here, you see it returns this bad request. If I make this appropriate one, but let's see, for example, I make the resource, a resource that doesn't exist. So what it is going to check is, based on this order, first it is going to check if the resource exists. After that, is the method supported for that resource? And then if query parameter is mandatory, like in this, is query parameter included? And if query parameter is included, is the password option a legit option? Is it one of these specifications? Let's see this one. Okay, send. So I have a resource that doesn't exist. Now API kit will invalidate it, as you can see. And the error is says not found. The resource is not found. If I click next, it will come to not found. And under not found, I have, if I click this, the transform message, you see resource not found. So if I do this, I see the same message, resource not found. And the reason, rather than the error, let me make this in design mode. The reason that it is returning these payloads in the transform message rather than the full error message is because you remember when we are doing error handling in the listener, we are able to specify under here under responses when there is an error, we are specifying here. Here we have put here, it puts when we have API kit, it puts it payload. That's why it is returning the payload. Had this been not there or made blank, it will return the error message. So it is this one is also an important thing. We are going to continue from here, complete this one. I have multiple Kahoot questions as well related to this one, deploy it,